Well, welcome to the morning Devo. It is 9:02. I'm late 2 minutes. So, let's get into this. Chapter 21, part 2, starting at verse 17. Paul arrives, big moment, arrives in Jerusalem. When we arrived at Jerusalem, the brothers received us warmly. The next day, Paul and the rest went to see James, the brother of Jesus, and all the elders were present. Paul greeted them, reporting in detail what God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. When they heard this, they praised God. They said to Paul, "You see, brothers, how many thousands of Jews have believed, and all of them are zealous for the law." This must have really blown away Paul, because Paul taught a message, of course, that we are not saved by the law, by works, but by grace. Now, this is something that Jesus taught as well, that just to come to Jesus, right? Come to Jesus, all who are heavy burdened, and he will give you rest. Take my commandments upon you. His commandments was what? Love God, love your neighbor. It wasn't a laundry list of works or things to do. And it's interesting that you see this kind of tug of war. Now, the theme that I kind of have this morning, just when I was thinking about this passage, just in my Devo and what we're doing here, is this idea of getting let down. Sometimes, the closest people that you think would be on your page, on your team, sometimes it just doesn't seem to click. And it's tough, like when you feel like a spouse is not kind of jiving with you right, and especially when it comes to spiritual things, like you want to serve the Lord and you have it on your heart, like to really dedicate your life to Jesus Christ as your master, as your Lord, and that you don't want to serve any other masters other than Jesus Christ. So you don't want anything else to move you, anything else to be dominant in your life as the big tug in your world. You want Jesus, his words, to be the big tug in your world. And the other person that you love and who loves you too, but they just don't see it that way. They just don't want to follow Christ like that. Or they have a disagreement in Christ about things. And here you see that kind of with the apostles. Here Paul says, hey, man, the Gentiles are doing it's amazing what's happening, he says, in my ministry. And then the disciples, James and the brother, says, hey, I want to tell you, thousands. Did you notice that? How many thousands of Jews have believed? Thousands of them have come to faith in Jesus. And notice what he says, though, that must have really got at Paul a little bit. It says, and all of them are zealous according to the law. Now, Paul elsewhere in his writings say the Jewish people have a zeal, but not according to knowledge. Now, Paul was a knowledgeable guy, and he was taught by a guy named Gamaliel. He'll say that here pretty soon. And in Gamaliel's writings, Gamaliel said about Paul that Paul was a student that he could not put enough books in front of. Paul was a guy who devoured knowledge, theology, philosophy, information. And here it says, here James, the brother of Jesus in Jerusalem, says, hey, Paul, I know all that stuff's going on great, but thousands of Jews are coming to the Lord, and they are zealous for the law. Paul, you get the idea that this is really an intense time, of conflict. James says, hey, I know what you're teaching, Paul. They know what Paul taught. But they're saying, hey, you know what? James says, hey, these guys are zealous for the law. Again, Paul says elsewhere, Jews are zealous for the law, but not according to knowledge. They don't understand the purpose of the law. And what was the purpose of the law? You guys can answer that. What was the purpose of the Ten Commandments? The law of God, all the laws, the first 5 books of the Bible. Get into Galatians chapter 3, verse 23, 24. 25, and you'll get your answer. It says, they have been informed that you teach all the Jews. Now notice, they have been informed. So all the Jews, the thousands of Jews have been informed. Isn't that interesting? All the thousands of converts to Jesus, of Jews in Jerusalem and the area proper probably, that have come to know Jesus Christ have been informed that you teach all the Jews who live among the Gentiles to turn away from Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or live according to our customs. All the Jews have been informed on these things of what you do, and what irks them, that you teach people not to turn away from Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or to live according to our customs. Now, Paul didn't teach this the way they're saying it. But it's kind of interesting that James doesn't say, hey, you know what, a lot of people have got weird views about you, but we got them set straight on what you're teaching. It doesn't say that. It just says that we have been informed that, or they have been informed. They all know, all thousands and thousands and thousands, I guess, of Jews that have come to know Jesus. They all have a bad idea of you, man. They don't like you. They have a bad rap on you. I mean, that is gnarly. And it says, what shall we do? So the apostles are like, they're kind of put in this situation. What should we do, Paul? I mean, I know you're coming here and you've brought this wonderful fellowship offering for the Feast of Pentecost, this wonderful harvest of money that has been collected by the Gentile church to help us out, which is great, but no one really digs you, dude. And you know, it's kind of created a problem, you being here. What should we do? Sometimes the closest people in our lives, man, just let us down. And, you know, what kept Paul going? You know, think about that. What kept Paul on the right track? You know, Paul could have easily went, dude, like, why don't you guys, like, haven't you guys talked to them and told them, all these thousands of people, like, the things I teach? Like, why didn't you tell them that we're no longer under the law? Like, why don't you teach these people that we're no longer saved by the law of Moses? Or that we're not saved by circumcision? That's not how we get saved. That's not what's in the Bible. You know, Paul could easily got into that, but he doesn't. It's interesting, right? Paul is focused on his call. He knows, and this is, I think, the answer is that Paul is focused on his call. He realizes his call to serve God. He can't change James. He can't change the apostles that are there, Peter and the other people that are probably there. He can't change those people. All he can do is follow his path, his call in Christ. And really, when it comes down to it, that's all you and I have, is just to follow Christ ourselves. We can't change our spouse. We can't change our boss. We can't change the coworkers that we're with. We can't change. I mean, sure, you could get another job, but then you got another boss, or you can become your own boss and have workers underneath you. But you can't. There's always going to be people in life, and at some point you have to get your mind off of everybody else as the excuse of our behavior, and we have to just be like, hey, I gotta focus on me and my call with God, you know. And that's what Paul does. Paul is focused on his call. And so this is what the apostles do, or what James, the brother of Christ, and all the rest of the elders do. Now, here we go. It says, they will certainly hear that you have come. All the Jews are going to hear that you have come. So do what we tell you. So they say, hey, Paul, we're going to tell you to do something. We want you to do it. There are 4 men with us who have made a vow. Take these men, these are Jewish men, and join in their purification rites Okay, so join in their rites, these ceremonies in the temple. Use the money to pay their expenses so that they can have their heads shaved. Then everybody will know that there is no truth in these reports about you, but that you yourself are living in obedience to the law. Wow. Now, Paul has some pretty strong words about those who obey the law. And you might want to check out, I think it's Philippians chapter 4 for that. It might be 4. Let me just check that real quick for you. But yeah, you might want to check out Philippians chapter 4 and read through that. Or let's see, chapter chapter 3. Chapter 3 of Philippians. You might want to read that, and you'll read about Paul's idea of confidence in the flesh, confidence in circumcision as being salvation. So Philippians chapter 3 would be a good one to read. But it says, hey, you see what the issue, I mean, you can see the problems going on in the early church, right, in Jerusalem. Some serious issues, some serious doctrinal issues. Is this why the book of Hebrews was written? Is this why Paul wrote some of the books he did? Is this why James, the brother of Jesus, wrote his book as well? Because of these issues that are going on here in Jerusalem. It says, as for the Gentile believers, we have written them our decision. They said, hey, don't you remember, Paul, we did send the Gentiles a letter that they should abstain from food sacrificed to idols, from blood, from meat strangled, and from sexual immorality. So we wrote a letter and saying, hey, Gentiles, just do this and you guys will, that'll be good. But then it says, the next day Paul took the men and purified himself along with them. Then he went into the temple to give notice of the date when the days of purification would end, and the offering would be made for each of them. So Paul says, okay, I'm going to do this, and I want to show you guys that I'm not causing any beef. Now notice what happens. Now, thousands and thousands and thousands of people have been informed that Paul is around and that Paul is teaching wacky tobacco stuff. And so everybody's on alert. Then it says, when the 7 days were nearly over, some Jews from the province of Asia, so remember they were all there for the Pentecost, time of Pentecost, the feast in Jerusalem, big giant festival actually. And you had Jews from all over the place, people that already saw Paul in other areas, Jews that have chased him everywhere as well. So not only do you have the thousands of Jews that have come to Jesus who are still obeying the law of God in the temple, but you have all the Jews from the other regions, Turkey, into what we know is Greece, in that area as well, traveled into Jerusalem to partake of the giant festival of Pentecost. And some of them very much were on Paul's trail to harm Paul, to do him ill will, to kill him. They did not like him at all. They felt like he was apostate. He was an infidel. Okay? He was totally against God and not serving God. And what do the apostles do? They put him right into the temple, to the most populated place where people would notice him. Very odd, by the way. And what happens? They stirred up a whole crowd and seized him. So what does Paul do? He goes there, and of course they're going to recognize him. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and enemies of Paul that have been chasing him, that people that we know that the people in Jerusalem already had been informed about Paul. So obviously James knows, everybody knows what's going on with Paul, and they put him right into the lion's den, right into the temple. Man, your friends can let you down, can't they? You can trust in man all you want. But what does the Bible say? Cursed is the one who trusts in man. Man, that's so true. We can't put everything in. We can't trust everybody. We can't trust anybody to fulfill all the things we need to be fulfilled the way we want them in our life. That's not gonna work. It's a dead end in our life when we do that. It's just gonna lead to depression in your life. We can't control people. We can't control the world. No matter how many documentaries you see on what's going on in our day and age, it doesn't. You have no control. You're not going to be able to control everything. You might be able to do some things and make some waves and change a few things here and there, but on the whole, man, things are going the way they're going. Now if you have a ton of money, a ton of money, and then you might have more influence in this world, right? But the problem is, Jesus said the love of many, or the love of money, is a root of all kinds of evil. And it also is, Jesus didn't say that, but it's in the writings of the New Testament. But Jesus said it's hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven, right? All that money and being pulled constantly into trying to control everything. And really, at the end of the day, you're going to die just like the poor person's going to die. And you're going to die alone and with nothing. And because we all are going to die alone, no one can come in us and walk with us in it other than the Lord. He can walk through death with you. And so you could see how this is really important, just to not trust in people, but we need to ultimately trust in the Lord. And so the men say, okay, they see Paul, and it says, and they say, this man teaches everywhere things contrary to this place, to the temple. And besides that, he has brought Greeks into the temple area, defiled this holy place. They had previously seen Trophimus, the Ephesian, in the city with Paul, and assumed that Paul had brought him into the temple area. The whole city was aroused, and the people came running from all directions, seizing Paul. They dragged him from the temple, and immediately the gates were shut. Man, they are in serious purification mode, man. Gentiles was in the temple. They shut the temple. While they were trying to kill him, news reached the commander of the Roman troops that the whole city of Jerusalem was in an uproar. He at once took the officers and soldiers and ran down to the crowd, where the rioters saw the commander and his soldiers, and they stopped beating Paul. The commander came and arrested him, and ordered him that he be bound with 2 chains. Then he asked who he was and what he had done. Some in the crowd shouted one thing and some another, and since the commander could not get at the truth because of the uproar, he ordered that Paul be taken into the barracks. When Paul reached the steps, the violence of the mob was so great that he had to be carried by the soldiers. The crowd that followed kept shouting, "Away with him." Does this sound a lot like Jesus, man? His death, right? Away with him. And it just blows my mind to think that here we go again, right? The apostles are there. They know what's going on. And here it is, deja vu all over again, right? And you think the apostles would stand up at this point and go, "That's right, that's Paul, the apostle. That's Paul, man. That's one of our bros. Man, we're with them. We're on a team. We're going to, guys, listen." Do they do that? No, they don't. And it says the crowd that followed kept shouting. And as the soldiers were about to take Paul into the barracks, he asked the commander, "May I say something to you?" "Do you speak Greek?" he replied. Aren't you the Egyptian who started a revolt and led 4,000 terrorists in the desert some time ago?" Paul answered, "I am a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no ordinary city. Please let me speak to the people." Having received the commander's permission, Paul stood on the steps and motioned to the crowd. When they were all silent, he said to them in Arabic, "Brothers." Very, very cool. Not only does he say brothers, he says brothers and fathers. Listen to my defense. Word defense is where we get apologetic, apologia, the idea of making a defense of our faith. Now, this is really interesting. Paul is arrested. The Roman soldier thinks he's a guy that actually was part of an uproar in Egyptian, a rebellion, if you will, from Rome, and around 54 AD. And Paul, so we know kind of the date of this area around that 54, 55, somewhere in there after the death of Christ time. So this is early church stuff, right? And here Paul says, or they hear Paul speak in Greek, and they go, "Whoa, are you Greek?" Right? Wow, or you speak Greek? And he says, "Hey, I am a Jew. I'm a Jew from Tarsus, so I'm outside of Israel. A citizen of no ordinary city, meaning he's a citizen, a Roman citizen. That was a big deal. We'll see how that's a big deal later on in the book of Acts." So Paul was a Roman citizen. That was, not everybody was a Roman citizen back then. So it was a very privileged place to be an actual Roman citizen. You had rights as a Roman citizen. You couldn't just be beaten if you were a Roman citizen. You had to go through a trial. And but Paul answers, "Yeah, I'm a Roman citizen, but I'm also a Jew." And he will talk about this. Now, Paul stands up, and all of the Roman authorities are there. And Paul now has all of his people that he has said, "Hey, I love them. The love of Christ has compelled me to share with them. And I would wish my life to be accursed for the sake of my brothers, Israel." And now he has Israel finally right there before him. He is ready to share. He has been wanting to share with those in Jerusalem. Everybody has warned him. All of his friends have warned him, "Don't go to Jerusalem, man. They're not going to treat you well." And so it's been known. It is known. James and the rest of the elders know of what's going down. No one's coming to Paul's rescue. Everybody's kind of all over the place probably at this time. And all you have is thousands of people that have heard Paul is against Moses, and they are in a massive uproar. But Paul is super stoked. He is compelled in the Holy Spirit to be there. Now, the reason why I keep just going this way is just so you see that it's his call that gives him, motivation, and gives him, the love to keep going. He's focused. He realizes that James and the apostles, and that they're struggling with other stuff, man. They're struggling with the law. They're struggling with compromising in different areas. He realizes that, even maybe his people that are with him are now scattered all over. They're not with him, right here. And he knows that he's alone. But what he has is that call from God, that sure call, man. Wow, how precious is that? And maybe today, just get on your knees and just say, "Hey God, I want to know you like that. I want to have your call on my life, where I feel compelled to serve you and compelled to share the love that you have loved me with to this world." And Lord, help me to know that call, to experience that call deep in my heart and deep in my mind, and let that be the motivation of my heart, so that when things let me down, when people let me down, Lord, I'm focused on you, and I realize that you have a plan and a call for me, and let me continue to stay focused on that. So, very cool, Devo. Tomorrow, Lord willing, Friday, we get to do this again. We will be sharing, or I'll be sharing, what Paul is now going to finally say to his people. So it should be really exciting. Take care.